Today I'm going to go over the 2022 season, looking at each individual player and the pitching staff, both the starters and relievers, to give you guys an idea of where we stand going into the 2022-23 offseason. We begin with Roman Quinn, who was our very first trade. He didn't hit that well. He honestly didn't play that much. He's not a power guy, so we really couldn't anticipate him doing a whole lot more than just being a speed demon. He actually played a career high in games this year, and he could definitely be a fourth outfielder. You know, a guy that we can pull off the bench as a pinch runner, as he has elite speed. I don't really understand his steal rating. Whatever, we don't concern ourselves about that. He can play the outfield. That's about it. He really doesn't bring a hell of a whole lot more other than the fact he's fast, and he happens to have some decent power against lefties. With Gabriel Moreno in the minors at the AAA level, we have to look at Alejandro Kirk and figure out what we're going to do with him. He is still pretty young, and we still have control of him for at least the next 3 seasons. Is he a starter? Probably not. Is he a starting DH? Possibly. It's really up in the air. Danny Jansen did play very well, so Kirk will definitely be the backup. The question is, do we want to move him in order to bolster up a different part of our team? Santiago Espinal is honestly pretty good for what we need him to be. He can play third, second, and short, and we have control of him for another 3 years. If Matt Chapman were to go down, if Bichette were to go down, or if we planned on moving on from Nick Madrigal, we've got a guy who seems like he can hold his own, as he played a little more than half of the season and put up pretty solid numbers. Is he a starter at any of those 3 positions? Probably not. But even at 27 years old, he still is going to hold a spot on this team, as the minors really need a revamp if we ever were going to replace him, even as a backup infielder. Danny Jansen, do not let the batting average fool you. He actually hit pretty well. His ISO power was a 204. That's damn good, really good, in a league where catchers just don't hit all that well. In 99 games, he put up good enough numbers that I just can't really see myself moving away from him. Again, the catcher position is really in flux, especially the backup catcher position. I could trade Jansen and get something else we might need again in the rest of the team to help that part of the team out, but Jansen seems to have a spot on this team. He's in the last year of his arbitration. Might as well roll the dice with him again, hoping that he can hit even better. I mean, hell, he hit 207, so he's got to hit better than that, right? And if MLB The Show ever kept the statistics of guys thrown out, you know, on stolen base attempts, I'm sure he'd be up there near the top of the league, as I believe he threw 3 or 4 guys out stealing in a single game. Craig Biggio is one of the few lefty hitters on our team that hits righties all that well. He's in the last year, or he'll be going into the last year of his arbitration. We could move him, as he doesn't really have a spot per se. He could play second, but I've replaced him with, say, Nick Madrigal, who hits for contact, though he doesn't hit for power. Again, another guy that could be on the move. He played fairly well in 114 games, which is probably more than I would have given him in a normal season. But, you know, I like to sub guys in and out, get guys some burn and stuff. He didn't really excel at anything too particular, though he crossed double digits in both doubles and home runs. He's still looking like a backup guy, a guy who was a platoon and a spot starter, if nothing else. Here's one of our few guys who is going to be an outright free agent, Raimel Tapia. He made a little under $4 million last year in 138 games. He just didn't hit that well. Coming from Colorado, I kind of figured he'd be a top of the lineup kind of guy who could, you know, start off a spark for the offense, and we just did not get that from him. So we moved him down to the bottom of the lineup, and he was okay. I mean, he's got the career high in home runs, but otherwise, I mean, we could replace him with something else if we want a starting corner outfielder. He played mostly right field just due to the fact he's left-handed throwing. Didn't steal anywhere near as many bases as I would have liked. 6 steals in 10 attempts. His fielding's good, so we could keep him, we could let him go. It all depends on what's out there in the market. On to one of our bigger contracts, guys that we have long-term, meaning probably more than 3 years. George Springer has 4 years and $100 million left on his contract. Didn't bat all that well, at least average-wise. He did get on base at a decent clip, and his ISO power, listen, if he can hit for better average, that ISO power is going well over 200. He'd be the kind of guy that he was in Houston. 20 doubles, over 20 home runs, and 5 triples, driving at 74 RBIs. I'm not going to knock him for not hitting better because, he at least drove guys in. Just would have been nice. Would have been nice if he did it at a better clip, and really, the offense as a whole could really use maybe a little bit of an overhaul, but we'll see how things play out. Teoscar Hernandez is the other outright free agent in the outfield. He played 144 games. Batted, I'm going to say average, 250, got on at a 301 clip, which is, I guess, fine. We do need to cut out the strikeouts for everybody across the board, put the ball in play a lot more. The game doesn't keep BABIP, so I don't know how well we were actually putting balls in play, but given that we have a number of guys with over 100 strikeouts, we're just going to say we didn't do all that well. He did drive in 61, and he did have 25 plus doubles and home runs, so more than likely we will retain his services and probably replace Tapia. We shall see. Josh Bell, the man who we traded for back in July 1st following Vlad Guerrero's Achilles tear injury. And while I can't parse out, or I don't really feel like parsing out the stats as to what he did in Washington versus what he did here in Toronto, I'm just going to say all around he had a good season. He just didn't do nearly as much as I would have liked, especially in the power department here in Toronto. Nationals Park, I'm pretty sure is bigger than what we have here in Toronto, but nonetheless, 21 home runs, 21 doubles. We could bring him back. The problem is he would be a backup, and I know, he's going to be one of the top free agents out there as a switch hitter, as a first baseman, and as a guy who could probably get back to the numbers that he hit in Washington elsewhere. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Nick Madrigal is not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, he's more than likely our leadoff hitter for the foreseeable future. He's going into his, I believe, second or third arbitration year. They didn't pay him that much. We'll pay him a bit more. Hell, we'll probably pay him a decent, probably double his money in order to keep him around. 294 average. Again, I can't parse out what he did in Chicago versus what he did in Toronto, but given that he kept his average up there, we have to keep him. We can't just let him walk and become some other team's leadoff hitter. Now, he gets on base. That's great. He doesn't hit for power worth a damn, but we need him to be a table setter, honestly. That table setter we thought Tapia could or would be. We're going to now give that distinction to Nick Madrigal. He had nearly 40 doubles on the season and also got 4 triples. Again, the power is just not going to be there if he can be a top of the lineup guy and just move guys over. To be honest, we've got a guy in our hands. He struck out under 70 times despite the fact he had 616 plate appearances, or ABs, can't say plate appearances, and he stole some bases. Fielding, it probably needs a little bit of work, but I'm not too concerned because our offense is what we need, probably a bit more so than defense at this point. Going into this series, I was really under the impression maybe halfway through that I was actually going to let Matt Chapman go, like trade him in the offseason, but he had a gold glove season, so I can't really see myself doing that. Third base is a premier defensive position, and he played almost 150 games. The batting average just has to come up. If he can get his batting average up on base, and his slugging will be just fine, and he will put up even better numbers than he did last season. Led the team in hits for guys that actually played the entire season here. 20 doubles, over 20 doubles, and over 20 home runs. I just wish he drove in more runs. I really do. But again, premier defensive position, and he's gonna hold back Espinal somewhat, but they'll interchange as need be, primarily for rest purposes. And lastly, of the players that stayed healthy throughout the season, Bo Bichette. If he's not the team MVP, he's real close to it. Over 270 average, got on base at a decent clip. Wish it were higher than 30 points more than his average, and an ISO of 204. With nearly 40 doubles and almost 30 home runs, if he can, I don't really know what more we can ask him to do more of, except maybe not have nearly as many errors, throwing errors. Just come back and give us the exact same thing. We insert Vlad Guerrero back in this lineup, and we've got to be a playoffs team in 2023. Starting pitching, I'm just going to handle as a whole. Alek Manoah could have and really should have been a winning pitcher a lot more often than he had this season. He'd been stuck on 14 wins, I think, since about mid-July, if not mid-June. Ends up second in the Rookie of the Year race behind Spencer Torkelson. But we also had two other pitchers who were standout this year. Jose Berrios leading the team in wins. Very good ERA, under 3. As you can see, we had 3 starters at under 3 ERA. Every guy's over 170 strikeouts and a whip under 1.2. All 3 of these guys have to come back. Now, Manoah is up for a contract, but he's in arbitration. I could either pay him now, or we can just parse it year by year and risk losing him in a couple seasons. Gausman not going anywhere. Gausman not going anywhere. Kikuchi also not going anywhere. He's got 2 years left on his deal. The thing is, Hyunjin Ryu, what are we going to do with him? We're paying him $20 million next year, and I'm just expecting him to fall off a cliff. Maybe we move him to a relief pitcher spot, as he'd probably be better off in spot duty there. Maybe we keep him as our 5th starter. It's really up in the air as to what we will do, but we are pretty set on the top 3 starters: Berrios, Manoah, and Gausman. So don't worry about them going anywhere. It's Ryu that may be an extremely overpriced long reliever so that we can get ourselves a 5th starter. And here is probably the part of the team that we really need to improve the most: our bullpen. Well, maybe, I don't know. It's really up in the air because our offense really could be better, which would have made our bullpen even better. So it's kind of, one side of the coin or the other. Julian Merriweather, just fine as a long reliever. I have no intention of getting rid of him. Trevor Richards, it's possible I can get rid of him. We'll see. Baruki. Honestly, Baruki and Meza, I don't think I pitched with them nearly as much as I thought I would this season, so they'll probably be back. Yimi Garcia, I think, is actually supposed to be the closer, and he's pitched pretty much like one. Granted, he pitched only 31 1/3 innings, so if you extrapolate that maybe out even more, he could have better numbers. He could fall off the cliff. Jordan Romano is either going to be a setup man or the closer. There is no in between. I'm not moving him in middle relief. Adam Simber, I like his delivery. He's just going to stay where it is. Somebody in this bullpen is going, and fortunately it's not because of money. As you can see here, we're not paying anybody too crazy. Yimi Garcia is getting paid. I don't know if I gave him that contract or he came in that way. I think he might have been signed to be the closer, and Jordan Romano just happens to be better. Let's be real, in attributes, that matter for relievers. Everybody else is pretty much an arbitration player, and we should get decent value if we choose to trade them, though relievers don't get nearly as much value as, say, Romano himself, the closer. Now, moving on as to what was the Achilles of our season. And yes, I know that is a pun given that Lourdes Gurriel was pretty much about the most consistent offensive player on this team following Guerrero's injury, but he also injured his Achilles, I believe, in the last series against the Yankees in late September. So I don't think he's a free agent, so he's not going anywhere. Why would I give up that much, offensive power that he was giving up, especially if he's getting help back, such as Vlad Guerrero Jr. Ended up second in the AL MVP race back in 2021 in real life. How that plays out in 2023 in this universe remains to be seen. Given the timetable for typical Achilles injuries, I'm going to say Guerrero will be back. Gurriel, on the other hand, it's a toss-up. He might be back in 6 months, which would mean he's back by the end of spring training, or we might sit him out a bit, and we shall see whether he plays in April, in May, or even in June, to keep the realism thing going. This isn't basketball, how like with Kevin Durant, where he needs to be explosive in order to, play his game. In baseball, you don't have to be nearly as explosive, especially not as an outfielder. Gurriel tends to be a DH. Guerrero plays first. His explosive movements are not him jumping and dunking a ball. So, see how things play out. The offseason should be coming up soon. Still not sure if I'm going to stream it or just, show you guys everything that I do. Check out any of the videos you see here on the screen before you on this channel or on my real life sports channel, State of the Franchise Sports. Peace out.